Imagine you're 6 years old. The lights go down in the theater. That iconic castle appears on screen. And for the next 90 minutes, you are completely, totally safe. The world Disney built for you is warm, magical, and perfect. The hero always wins. The villain always falls. Love conquers everything. And you believed it, because why wouldn't you? But what if that world was built on something far darker than anyone ever told you? What if the smiling faces, the singing animals, the fairy godmothers, what if every single one of them was carrying a secret so disturbing that Disney buried it deep inside vaults, inside legal clauses, inside decades of corporate silence? Not because it was shameful, but because if you ever found out the truth, you would never look at those characters the same way again. This is not a story about Disney being evil. It's something far more unsettling than that, because the real secret isn't about what they did wrong. It's about what they got absolutely, devastatingly right, and what it cost. To understand this, you have to go back. Not to 1937, not to Snow White, not even to Walt himself. You have to go back to a small, windowless room in the 1920s, in a struggling animation studio that had just lost everything. A young cartoonist sitting in the dark, completely broke, recently swindled out of his own creation by a distribution company that took his character, his team, and his future, and left him with nothing. That cartoonist was 26 years old. His name was Walt Disney, and in that moment of total collapse, he did something that would quietly shape the psychology of every child born in the next 100 years. He didn't draw something happy. He drew something real. He drew a mouse, small, powerless, living in a world that didn't care about him. But here's the part nobody talks about. That mouse was never just a character. That mouse was Walt. And when Walt gave that mouse a personality, not just funny, not just cute, but genuinely vulnerable, genuinely afraid, genuinely trying, something happened that no one in the entertainment industry had ever seen before. Audiences didn't just laugh. They felt something. And that feeling, that specific, almost uncomfortable emotional intimacy between a viewer and a drawing, became the foundation of the most powerful entertainment empire in human history. But here's where the story gets complicated, because Walt didn't just accidentally stumble onto emotion, he studied it, he obsessed over it. He hired a man named Don Graham to run drawing classes, not art classes, not animation classes, but acting classes for cartoonists. He told his animators something that no one in Hollywood believed at the time. The audience doesn't connect to what a character looks like. They connect to what a character feels. And if you could make them feel it too, if you could reach through the screen and grip someone in the chest, then you owned them. Completely. That's when the real experiment began. Walt started doing something that seems obvious now, but was radical then. He would gather his animators and act out entire scenes himself, physically, dramatically. He would stomp around the room, cry at his own stories, shout at his own characters, and his animators would watch, not the drawings, but him, because he understood something that the entire psychology of human connection rests on. People don't follow stories. People follow feeling. And Disney characters were engineered, deliberately, methodically engineered, to produce that feeling on demand. Think about Bambi's mother. One gunshot, no body shown, no extended death scene, just silence, and a small deer calling out into the empty forest. Why is that one of the most traumatic childhood memories for millions of adults worldwide? Because Walt specifically chose not to show it. He understood that what the human mind imagines is always more devastating than what it sees. He used the architecture of absence, the gap between the gunshot and the silence, the space where your own imagination fills in the horror. That wasn't an accident. That was design. And it goes deeper. Simba's father falling from a cliff. Elsa locked in her room for years, terrified of herself. Dumbo being separated from his mother while she reaches through the cage bars. These are not random story choices. These are precisely calibrated emotional triggers. Specifically, the fear of abandonment, the terror of being different, the helplessness of a child who cannot protect the people they love. Every single Disney film targets the same emotional nerve endings, not because the writers were dark people, but because Walt discovered early on that childhood trauma, when experienced safely, through story, creates an emotional bond that lasts a lifetime. You don't just remember Bambi, you are bonded to Bambi. You are bonded to the feeling Bambi gave you in a dark theater when you were small and the world felt large and unsafe. And Disney, the corporation, owns that bond. That is the secret. Not that they use darkness, but that they use darkness scientifically, in service of something that would permanently wire your emotional relationship to their brand. Now here's where it turns. By the 1990s, something had changed. Walt was gone. The men running Disney now understood the formula, but they understood it differently. They knew it worked. They just didn't know why anymore. So they hired psychologists, actual psychologists, consumer behavior specialists, child development researchers, to study audience response to Disney content. What they found was extraordinary and terrifying in equal measure. Children who watched Disney films repeatedly showed patterns of emotional attachment to characters that mirrored, not metaphorically, but clinically mirrored, the same neural patterns as attachment to real people. The characters weren't just characters. In the developing brain of a child, a Disney hero activated the same emotional circuits as a parent, a sibling, a best friend. This is not a conspiracy. This is documented developmental psychology. Children cannot fully distinguish between emotional reality and emotional fiction. Their brains are not finished yet, and Disney content was specifically, whether consciously or not, built to exploit that window. That window between the ages of roughly 3 and 10, when the brain is most malleable, most hungry for emotional models, most likely to encode deep, permanent attachments. So what did Disney do with this information? They built a kingdom around it. Merchandise, theme parks, streaming platforms, sequels, prequels, spin-offs, all designed not just to sell products, but to continuously reactivate that original emotional attachment. The first time your child sees Mickey Mouse isn't a commercial transaction. It's a neurological event. Everything that comes after is simply maintenance. But there's another layer, one that even dedicated Disney researchers rarely talk about. Go back and watch the original Disney films with adult eyes. Watch what the villains are actually doing. Ursula doesn't just want power. She wants to be seen, to be heard, to matter in a world that excluded her. Scar doesn't just want the throne. He wants the acknowledgement that he deserved better. Maleficent wasn't even invited to the party. Think about that. The most feared villain in Disney history. Her entire origin story is a social rejection. And here is what that tells you. Disney's villains were never just obstacles for the hero to defeat. They were mirrors. They were showing children, without ever saying it out loud, this is what happens to the parts of yourself you're not allowed to express. The anger, the ambition, the feeling of being left out. Disney didn't just teach children what to want. It taught children what to fear about themselves. And that is where the true psychological weight of this story lands. Because for decades, parents sat their children down in front of these films believing they were providing comfort, believing Disney was the safe choice, the wholesome choice. And in many ways, it was. But comfort built on suppressed darkness has a cost. An entire generation, multiple generations, learned their emotional vocabulary from stories that said, your dark feelings make you a villain. Your fear of being different will destroy you. Your uncontrolled power will hurt everyone you love. And the only way to be loved is to be good, small, manageable, safe. The moment of reckoning came slowly, then all at once. It came when filmmakers inside Disney itself, writers and directors who had grown up on these same films, started to push back. Frozen wasn't just a love story, it was a deconstruction of the Disney formula. Elsa's arc wasn't about finding a prince. It was about integrating the parts of yourself you've been forced to hide. Moana wasn't saved by love. She was saved by truth, by understanding where she came from and choosing herself anyway. Inside Out, a Pixar film under Disney's banner, literally put the psychology of emotional suppression on screen and told children for the first time, sadness is not the enemy. You cannot build a life worth living on joy alone. These weren't just better stories, they were an apology, a quiet, animated apology from the machine itself, acknowledging that maybe the formula had costs nobody wanted to talk about. And now, here we are. In an era where Disney is under more scrutiny than at any point in its history, where audiences are questioning everything from its labor practices to its political positions to the subtle messages baked into its content for a century. And the strange, uncomfortable truth is this. Disney didn't become powerful because it lied to children. It became powerful because it told children emotional truths so precisely that those truths attach themselves to the company like a second skeleton. You can be angry at Disney, you can criticize Disney, but the version of yourself that first felt wonder, first felt loss, first understood that love means sacrifice, that version of you was shaped in part by these stories. And no amount of cynicism fully undoes that. That is the darkest secret of all. Not that Disney manipulated children, but that the manipulation and the magic were the exact same thing. The tool that made you feel the most real emotions of your childhood was also the tool that encoded in you a permanent customer relationship with a corporation. And it worked so completely, so invisibly, that 90 years later, we're still sitting in darkened theaters, handing over our hearts the same way Walt always knew we would. The question is not whether Disney's characters carry darkness. Of course they do. The question is what you do with that knowledge now, because understanding how a system works doesn't free you from it automatically, but it gives you something Walt never wanted you to have: the ability to watch the movie and see the strings, to feel the emotion and still ask who designed it and why, and what it cost everyone involved. That awareness is not cynicism. It's the thing that turns a passive audience into active thinkers. And in a world where every platform, every algorithm, every piece of content is engineered to capture your attention and keep you inside an emotion, that kind of awareness might be the most important skill you can build. If this story made you think differently about something you thought you already understood, that's exactly what this channel exists for. Dark Sphere goes where most creators won't. Not to shock you, not to perform outrage, but to hand you the flashlight and let you look at the parts of the world that were deliberately built without windows. If that's the kind of content you want more of, you know what to do. Subscribe. Share this with someone who thinks they already know the full story, because they probably don't, and neither did you, until right now.